Growing up just north of Pittsburgh, I'd always heard versions of it. Stories about a stretch of woods that supposedly runs from the West Virginia line, up past Morgantown, skirting past Pittsburgh, and then all the way up towards Erie before bending towards Harrisburg. People claimed there were sightings of some type of dog-like creature all along that path. They called it the Lichen Loop. I always thought it was just usual Reddit stuff. Dogman stories, oversized coyotes, hunters exaggerating what they saw at dusk. Nothing I ever took really seriously. But all that changed one afternoon last month. My girlfriend and I were looking for something quick to do on a Sunday. Something simple, just one of those easy little trails outside the city where people go to walk their dogs. We ended up at a place about 20 minutes from downtown. Families were leaving and a few cars were still around. It was chill, nothing strange. We started walking the trail, talking about work. Nothing exciting. About 10 minutes in, my girlfriend stopped and asked, "Did you hear that?" And I told her it was probably a deer. This area was full of them. But after another minute, I heard it too. Footsteps, but not steady like a jogger or someone cutting through the woods. More like pacing, matching our strides, stopping when we stopped. And I kept looking behind us because the sound wasn't far, maybe 20 or 30 feet into the tree line. But I didn't see anything. Then something else happened that made both of us stop talking completely. We heard breathing. Not heavy breathing like a dog, and not the grunt of a deer. It was low, slow, almost controlled, like whatever it was knew exactly where we were. Then the smell hit us, like decay. My girlfriend grabbed my arm and said she wanted to go back. We kept walking quicker now, and I was glancing to the right because the sound was staying with us, paralleling us, same distance, same speed. And at one point, I caught movement between trees, something low but big, too big for a normal coyote. The shape was different. The back looked arched, like its spine wasn't straight, and the head, it almost looked too large for its body. But it was only for a split second, and then it ducked behind a tree. We didn't talk the rest of the way back. We were too scared, paranoid that this thing was going to come out after us. We just walked fast enough not to look too panicked to other people if we came across them. When we got back near the trailhead and towards the empty part of the parking lot, that's when it happened. We were about 10 feet from my car when something came out from between the last row of trees. And it was just enough to catch the light from the street lamp. Not a full reveal. Not even for a long time, but just long enough. It stood on all fours. The fur was patchy, almost mangy-like, but the shoulders were massive, way too broad for a normal canine. And the snout, it looked pulled back, like its teeth didn't fit inside its mouth. It stared at us for maybe 2 seconds before turning and slipping back into the woods without a sound. We got inside the car and locked the door immediately. Neither of us said anything until I was halfway down the road. When we got home, I instantly posted this on Reddit in the Lichen Loop area, half expecting people to laugh or tell me it was a sick coyote. Instead, the opposite happened. People from all over western and central Pennsylvania started commenting, saying they'd seen almost the exact same thing along the same weird stretch of forest that people call the Lichen Loop. Some say it wasn't a dog man, not the upright kind, more like a hybrid, something that looked like a coyote but wasn't. A few even said Pennsylvania Game Commission had been quietly dealing with unknown canine incidents for years. I don't know what we saw that afternoon, but it wasn't a normal animal, and I still to this day have no idea what we really saw out there. So the story takes us to late 2021, when I took a maintenance job checking old infrastructure sites along the edge of the Appalachian Mountains. Most of the work was boring, hiking in, taking photos, filling out forms. One of these sites was an old concrete runoff tunnel tucked halfway up a ridge outside of Fayette County. It wasn't deep, maybe 100 feet, but nobody had been inside for years. Forestry wanted pictures of the interior to see if it was still structurally sound. Just another assignment. The tunnel had two entrances, one on the hillside, one lower down where the water used to drain out decades ago. The upper entrance was easy to access, so that's where I went. When I stepped inside, it felt like walking into a basement that hadn't been opened in forever. Dusty, stale, and colder than outside. My flashlight lit up the concrete walls, all covered in old spray paint. About 20 feet in, the ground dipped slightly. Water must have sat in there at one point, because the floor turned muddy. Not deep, but enough to leave prints. And that's what caught my attention. There were footprints inside the tunnel. Not boots, not sneakers. Bare feet, a full set, heel, arch, toes, clear as day in the mud. I stood there trying to make sense of it. The prints were dry, so they weren't fresh, but they weren't old either. They led deeper into the tunnel, towards the darker end where the other exit should have been. I snapped a couple of pictures for documentation and followed them, figuring maybe kids just dared each other to come in here. But the deeper I went, the more off everything felt. The prints started spacing out strangely, almost like whoever made them wasn't walking normally. Some were staggered, some were angled too far inward. It looked like whoever it was kept stopping and turning like they were listening for something. When I reached the last 10 feet of the tunnel, the prints just stopped, right before the lower exit. I expected to see daylight. Instead, the opening was blocked by a sheet of rusted metal. It looked like it had fallen from the inside. There was no way anyone barefoot could have crawled out. I took a picture and turned around to leave. Halfway back, I heard something behind me. Not dramatic, just a single shift of weight on mud. The kind of sound you hear when someone adjusts their stance. I froze and aimed my flashlight towards the lower end. Nothing. But the mud had a new mark, like someone's heel had pressed down once. I didn't run, nor did I panic. But I walked out that tunnel without stopping again. When I got outside, I did something I never do on these jobs. I locked my truck doors before I even sat down. I sent the photos to forestry, wrote my report, and never asked what they did with that site after. But those bare footprints inside a sealed tunnel, that's the part I still think about. Because whoever, or whatever, made them, never walked back out. So the story takes us to early November of 2022, when I went up to check an old game camera I strapped to a maple tree on a ridge in the Appalachian Mountains. I had set this up earlier for deer movement, but like always, life got busy and I just never made back the trip. It was late in the afternoon when I finally hiked up there. The ridge was the same as it always was, steep and rocky, nothing but hardwoods and dead leaves for what felt like miles. The camera was still there, strapped tight, battery half dead, but it was holding. I popped the SD card out and headed back to my truck. I didn't want to scroll through photos in the woods, and you'd be surprised how odd it feels sitting alone with images of the same place you're standing in. I waited until I got back to the truck and started flipping through the pictures on my laptop. The first few shots were nothing. A couple of deer, a fox, a raccoon climbing a tree, exactly what I expected. Then I saw a frame that just didn't make any sense. A shape standing between the trees. Now, this wasn't an animal, not a person. It was just like a tall outline, almost as something was leaning forward to look directly at the camera, but caught just outside the range of clarity. The next picture, though, is what made me really uncomfortable. It was a close-up. not of a face, but what looked like skin or something like it, pale and stretched, textured, almost like bark soaked in water. It was hard to explain. The camera must have been triggered by something standing inches from the lens. The following photo was solid static. Then the timestamp jumped forward by exactly 3 minutes, which shouldn't happen. I mean, the camera fires instantly whenever it detects motion. The last image from that night, though, really is what got me. It was my tent, the old green one I keep in the back of the truck. Except the photo was taken from higher than any person could have reached on that hillside. The angle looked like something tall was looking down through the trees into my campsite. But here's the thing. I hadn't camped in there in months, which meant that picture wasn't old. It was recent. Something had been standing on that ridge, staring down the same clearing I planned to sleep in that night. I shut the laptop, threw everything in the back of the truck, and drove without looking back. The next morning, I stopped by the ranger station and told them what I found. The one ranger just looked up to me and just, said, "Trail camps glitch all the time, don't overthink it." But another ranger looked up when I mentioned the ridge. He didn't look suspicious or spooked, but he got real attentive. He asked almost casually, "Was your camera facing downhill?" And I'm like, "Yeah, towards the clearing." He just kind of nodded a little, like that answered something for him. He tells me, that side of the ridge is always weird activity for the last couple of years. Tracks nobody can match, noise complaints at night. Nothing we can write up. But you're not the only one who's mentioned it. He turned back to his paperwork like he was finished and then just added, "If you go camping solo again, pick a spot closer to the service road. Phones actually work down there. Just safer overall." And honestly, that bothered me more than anything I saw on the camera, because it told me he believed something was out there, and he just didn't want to say what he thought it might be.